Mission is a go.
You think you know what courage looks like. You've seen in movies the slow walk, the dramatic music, the perfectly timed one-liner before the hero saves the day. You think courage is loud, big, announced. Then you meet someone like Maya Chun, and you realize courage doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks into a room wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big, carrying a gas station coffee, tripping over the welcome mat, and still somehow ends up being the most dangerous person in the building. This is not a story about a superhero. This is a story about a woman who spent 12 years learning how to disappear. Into missions, into silence, into the kind of darkness most people don't survive, and then had to figure out how to exist in a world that expected her to laugh at birthday cake jokes and make small talk about the weather. This is about what happened the day the world stopped taking her seriously, and what happened right after. The morning it all started, Maya Chun was late. Not in a dramatic car chase, dodging traffic kind of late. In the worst possible kind. The kind where you overslept because you forgot to charge your phone, your alarm died at 3 a.m., and you woke up at 8:47 for a 9 o'clock meeting you had already rescheduled twice. She pulled into the parking lot of Meridian Corporate Solutions, a name so aggressively boring it felt like the building itself had given up, and sat for exactly 4 seconds in the car. For seconds to breathe. For seconds to remind herself that this was just a job. A consulting gig. 3 months, maybe 4. Help them restructure their security protocols, take the paycheck, disappear again. She was good at disappearing. The blazer was her sister's. She grabbed it off the doorknob on the way out, because apparently her one attempt at civilian professional dressing, a black turtleneck and dark slacks, wasn't corporate enough, according to her sister, who worked in marketing and had opinions about everything. The blazer was cream-colored with gold buttons, and it fit Maya the way a tent fits a tent pole. She didn't care. She had bigger problems, like the fact that the gas station coffee she'd bought on the way was lukewarm and tasted like the inside of a car tire, and she'd already drunk half of it out of desperation. She walked into the building at 8:59. The lobby was what you'd expect. Marble floors, a reception desk staffed by a young man who smiled like he was being paid per what, motivational posters on the wall that said things like teamwork makes the dream work in fonts that deserve jail time. There was a large conference room visible through a glass wall to the left, already full of people in chairs, and Maya could see through the glass that someone was setting up a projector. She signed in, got her visitor badge, and the smiling receptionist said, "You're just in time. They're all in the Horizon room. Second door on the left." "Great," she said. She walked to the Horizon room. She opened the door. 23 faces turned to look at her. 23 people in business casual, holding coffee cups and notebooks mid-conversation, suddenly very aware of the woman in the too big cream blazer, standing in the doorway, holding a gas station cup like it was a grenade. There was a beat of silence. And then the man at the front of the room, broad-shouldered, silver-templed, the kind of executive who bought his watch before he bought his car, looked at her over the rim of his reading glasses and said, pleasantly enough, "Can we help you?" Maya looked at her badge. Room number matched. She looked at the projector screen. It said Security Audit Q3, External Consultant Briefing. She said, "I'm the external consultant." The silence stretched. And then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, from a man who would later deeply regret it, came a laugh. Short, involuntary, the kind that escapes before the brain can catch it. It was one laugh, but it opened a door, because then someone else smiled, and someone else looked down at their notebook to hide it. And the man at the front of the room, his name was Richard Holloway, Senior VP of Operations. She'd read his file on the drive over, kept his expression professionally neutral, which was its own kind of condescension, because professionally neutral when someone walks in a room means you've already decided they don't belong there and you're being polite about it. Maya set her coffee cup on the table near the door. She pulled out the chair at the far end, the one closest to the projection screen, and sat down. She said, "I'm Maya Chun. I've been contracted to conduct a full review of your physical and digital security infrastructure. I'll need access to your server room, your executive floor keycard logs for the past 90 days, and a list of every employee who is building access after 10 p.m. She looked at Richard Holloway. "We can start with that, or we can talk about why the side entrance on your northeast corner hasn't had a working camera since March. Your choice." The room went quiet in a different way this time. Richard Holloway took off his reading glasses. He said, "I apologize. How long have you been in security consulting?" And there it was. The question that wasn't a question. The polished conference room version of, "Who are you, actually? And why should anyone in this room listen to you?" Maya had been asked versions of this question her entire career. The first time, she was 22, fresh out of training, the only woman in a room of men who had already decided she was there to take notes. She'd answered it differently then. She'd been angrier then, quicker to prove, quicker to push back. 12 years had a way of filing the edges off things. She said, "Long enough." She said it the way she said everything, flat calm, with the particular stillness of someone who has been in situations where stillness was the only thing keeping her alive. It was not an aggressive calm. It was not a performed calm. It was just calm, like the surface of water in a place where the wind doesn't reach. Richard Holloway put his glasses back on. He said, "Well, let's get started then." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Maya spoke for maybe 20 minutes of it, targeted, specific, precise. She didn't use jargon. She didn't use slides. She'd done her homework in the parking lot, and in the 3 days before that, reading everything she could get her hands on about Meridian Corporate Solutions. And what she knew about their security was this. It had the bones of a system built 10 years ago by someone who understood security in 2014 and then never updated because updating cost money and nothing catastrophic had happened yet. And in corporate environments, nothing catastrophic happening yet is often misread as nothing. Catastrophic being possible. She told them about the Northeast camera. She told them about the server room. Specifically, the fact that the ventilation shaft above, it was accessible from the maintenance corridor on the 4th floor, which she had walked through that morning on her way to the restroom, and which had a lock that could be opened with a flathead screwdriver, and a particular kind of patience she happened to possess. She didn't tell them she tested it. She didn't need to. The room's energy shifted somewhere around the 40-minute mark. Not dramatically, but she felt it, the slight adjustment in posture, the way notebooks got picked up, the way eyes started going to her when she spoke instead of politely past her. Except for one man. He was sitting at the far left side of the table, third chair from the end, and he had the look of someone who had arrived at the meeting with an agenda and was annoyed that the meeting had become about something else. His name tag said Brett, facilities director, and he had the energy of a man who had never in his professional life been told that something he oversaw was not adequate and did not intend to start accepting it now. He waited until she finished a point about keycard logging systems and said, with a smile that was all surface, "This is all very thorough. But I want to flag for the room that our current system passed its last internal audit with no major findings." Maya looked at him. "Who conducted the audit?" she said. A pause. "Our internal facilities team," he said. She nodded slowly. "Right," she said, and moved on. It was the right that did it. 2 letters. No elaboration. The room understood exactly what it meant, and Brett understood it too, which was why his jaw went slightly tight, and he wrote something in his notebook with the force of a man who would rather be writing something else entirely. After the meeting, as people filed out, a younger woman, early 30s, sharp eyes, the kind of competent that gets mistaken for aggressive in certain company, stopped beside Maya. "That was good," she said quietly. "The thing you said about the audit." "I said one word," Maya said. "I know," the woman said, and smiled. "I'm Priya, Senior Security Analyst. I've been trying to get someone to look at that ventilation shaft for 4 months." She paused. Nobody took me seriously either. Maya picked up her gas station cup. Still cold now. She drank it anyway. "They will," she said. She spent the rest of the day doing the thing she was actually hired to do. She walked the building. She noted every entrance and exit. She tested 3 emergency stairwell doors and found that 2 of them opened from the outside with a standard override code that hadn't been changed since the building's last renovation. A fact she confirmed by looking at the date stamped inside the door panel housing, which read, in faded ink, "Last serviced, August 2016. She sat in the parking structure for 40 minutes watching badge access patterns. She noted which employees tailgate, walked through secure doors behind others without swiping their own card, and how many security personnel noticed. The answer was 0, because there were 2 security guards on a floor with 12 entry points. And they were both stationed at the main lobby desk, which was exactly where the building's original security plan had put them in 2011 and where they had been ever since, because nobody had looked at whether that still made sense. She ate a vending machine sandwich at 2 p.m. standing at the window of the fourth floor break room, looking out at the parking lot, thinking about the northeast camera, thinking about the ventilation shaft, thinking about the particular way Brett had smiled at her, like she was a thing to be managed rather than a person to be answered. She'd been managed before. She'd been underestimated before. She had a folder somewhere of every performance review that had used the word promising instead of exceptional, every briefing where someone had quietly handed her deliverables to a male colleague to present, every room where the first thing she had to do before anyone would listen to her actual words was establish, silently, through sheer unchanging presence, that she was not going to be moved. She was very good at not being moved. She finished the sandwich. She threw the wrapper away. She went back to work. By the time 6 p.m. arrived and the building began to empty, she had a preliminary list of 43 security vulnerabilities ranked by severity, with remediation timelines and cost estimates. She had flagged 6 as critical. She had flagged 1, the ventilation shaft, combined with the server room's outdated access logging, as requiring immediate attention. She sat in the parking lot and typed up her notes in the car. Her phone rang. Her sister. "How was the first day?" Her sister said. "Did you wear the blazer?" "Yes." "Did it help?" Maya looked at the building, at the dark northeast corner where the camera should have been blinking its small red light. "I'll return tomorrow," she said. Her sister said, "Maya, normal people say it was fine. Just try it. Just say it was fine." A pause. "It was fine," Maya said. Her sister made a sound that was half laugh, half despair. "You said it like you were filing a report." "I was filing a report," Maya said. "Just now, while we were talking. It's done." Her sister hung up, and Maya looked at the parking lot and thought about how strange it was, this version of her life. The version where the biggest threat in the room was a man named Brett with a facilities budget and a bruised ego. The version where she ate vending machine sandwiches and drove herself home and slept in a bed that didn't fold up in under 30 seconds. She turned the key. The engine started. She thought, 3 months, maybe 4. She drove home. She had no idea what was coming. The thing about 12 years of training, real training, the kind that doesn't stop at the gym or the firing range, the kind that builds into your nervous system until it's just how your body processes the world, is that it doesn't go away. It just goes quiet. Maya had been out of active service for 14 months. She had taken the consulting work because her former commanding officer, a woman named Colonel Reyes who communicated primarily through clipped sentences and meaningful silences, had told her that she needed to reintegrate. That was the word she'd used. Reintegrate. Like Maya was a puzzle piece that had been living outside the box for a while and needed to be worked back in. She'd understood what the colonel meant. She just wasn't sure she agreed that this Meridian Corporate Solutions, gas station coffee, a blazer with gold buttons, was what reintegration looked like. But she'd taken a job, and she'd been doing it. And for 43 days, nothing had happened that required anything more from her than patience and observation and the occasional expertly deployed right. Until day 44. Day 44 started the same as every other day. Maya arrived at 8:55. She signed in. She got her badge. She walked to the 4th floor, where she'd set up a temporary workspace in a small glass-walled office near the server room. An office that had previously been used for storage and still smelled faintly of old cardboard, which she didn't mind because she'd worked in places that smelled considerably worse. She poured herself coffee, real coffee this time, from the break room machine because Priya had shown her how to use it on day 3 and it had changed the quality of her mornings meaningfully. She sat down. She opened her laptop. She looked at the security feed she'd had rerouted to her screen. A small grid of camera views covering the main entrances, the server room corridor, the executive floor, and the parking structure. And she stopped. The northeast corner camera was back online. Had been reinstalled 2 days ago, finally, after she'd flagged it 3 times in writing and once verbally to Brett, who had received the information each time with the patience of a man counting to 10 internally. But there was a second camera, one she hadn't flagged because she hadn't known it existed, a small unit mounted inside the maintenance corridor on the 4th floor, half hidden behind a ventilation pipe. The kind of camera that doesn't show up in building schematics because it was installed after the original documentation was filed, which meant either someone put it there unofficially or someone had updated the system and never updated the records. Both were problems, but the second one was a different kind of problem. She pulled up the maintenance corridor footage from the past 72 hours. She watched it for 11 minutes. Then, she picked up her phone and called Colonel Reyes. The colonel answered on the second ring, which was unusual. She said, "Chun." Maya said, "I need to ask you something about Meridian Corporate Solutions." A pause. Not long pause, but the kind that is wait. "Ask," the colonel said. Maya asked. The colonel was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she said, "What did you find?" And Maya told her. And the colonel said, in a voice that had gone very flat and very still, the kind of voice that meant something serious was being recalibrated behind it. "Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. I'm making a call." She hung up. Maya set her phone down on the desk. She looked at the coffee in her hand. Real coffee, good coffee, the kind Priya had taught her to make. She drank it. She waited. Outside the glass office wall, the fourth floor hummed with its ordinary Tuesday morning. People walked by with folders. Someone laughed at something near the printer. The motivational poster on the wall across the corridor said, "Every day is a new opportunity," in a font that still deserved jail time. Maya waited. She was very good at waiting. She had no idea that in approximately 6 hours, the laughter she'd heard on her first day in the Horizon room, that short, involuntary, door-opening laugh, was going to get answered in a way that nobody in this building was prepared for. Nobody except her. The call Colonel Reyes made was to a man named Hargrove. Maya didn't know his first name. She'd never met him in person. She knew him the way you know a weather system, by its effects on other things. She knew that when Reyes said his name, it was always with a particular set of the jaw. She knew that 3 operations she'd been on in the past decade had required a sign-off, and that each time she'd been briefed on what she could and could not discuss with him, the list of could-nots had been significantly longer. She knew that his official title was something unremarkable, deputy director of something, and that his actual role was the kind that didn't appear in any org chart that would survive a records request. She knew enough, which meant that when Colonel Reyes called her back 40 minutes later and said, "Hargrove wants a direct brief. Him, tonight, 7 o'clock. Use the address I'm sending you." Maya understood that what she had found in that maintenance corridor footage was not a small thing. She hadn't thought it was a small thing when she found it. But having Hargrove confirm it without confirming it, the way powerful men do, by showing up before they're expected, made her chest do something she categorized as significant. She filed that away and went back to work. The day moved like days do when you're carrying something heavy and try not to show it, slowly in the places you want to rush, and too fast in the stretches where you need to think. She got through 2 more vulnerability assessments. She answered Priya's questions about the keycard logging system. She ate another vending machine sandwich. She nodded through a 15-minute conversation with Brett about the camera reinstallation that she had absolutely no memory of afterward. At 4:30, she went to the restroom on the 4th floor. She stood at the sink and looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 8 seconds. 12 years. 3 theaters of operation. 1 language she spoke fluently that most people didn't know she spoke. 14 months of reintegration, of coffee machines, and consulting fees, and a cream blazer with gold buttons. And here she was. Still, she ran cold water over her wrists, a habit she'd picked up somewhere, a field medic trick for keeping your heart rate down when your nervous system wants to start sprinting ahead of you. The cold water helped. It always helped. She dried her hands. She went back to work. At 6:15, she left the building, drove for 12 minutes, and parked on a side street near a Vietnamese restaurant that she knew from the address code Reyes had sent her, a system they'd used since Maya's second year, locations encoded in restaurant names and cross streets rather than explicit addresses because old habits don't retire gracefully. The restaurant itself was just a restaurant. She went in, ordered soup she had no intention of eating, and sat at the table by the window. At 6:58, a man sat down across from her who looked like a retired accountant, heavy set, reading glasses on a lanyard, a face designed to be forgotten, and said without preamble, the camera wasn't installed by building management. "I know," Maya said. "It was installed 14 weeks ago by a contractor who doesn't exist. The LLC has 2 filings and a P.O. box in Delaware." He picked up the menu. Meridian has a government contract. Department of Defense. Subcontracted logistics for a specific supply chain. Very narrow. Very specific. He set the menu down. The supply chain includes a facility in the southwest that processes communications equipment. The server room at Meridian holds encrypted logs of that processing, transit manifests, timestamps. Maya looked at her soup. Someone's been watching the server room, she said. Someone's been watching who watches the server room, he said. The camera faces the corridor, not the server room door. It's positioned to capture anyone who approaches the access panel. She sat with that for a moment. They're mapping security behavior, she said. Looking for patterns. Looking for gaps. He said nothing, which meant yes. How long have you known? She said. He didn't answer that either, which also meant something. Meant long enough, meant longer than she'd been there, meant that her finding the camera was either very timely or very convenient or possibly, in the way these things sometimes worked, both at once. What do you need from me? She said. He looked at her over the lanyard glasses. He said, we need you to stay in place. Continue your work. Do not alter your behavior or your access patterns. He paused. We believe they'll make a move within the next 2 weeks. They need physical access to the server room to extract the logs. They can't do it remotely. The system's air-gapped. So someone has to come in. And you need to know who, she said. And we need to know who, he said. She nodded once. He stood up. He left 2 20s on the table, which covered both their meals and the tip exactly, which meant he'd looked up the menu before coming, which told her something about his habits that she filed away automatically, the way she filed everything. Not because she needed it yet, but because need has a way of showing up without calling ahead. He walked out. She ate 3 spoonfuls of the soup. It was very good. She paid for it anyway, took the 20s, left them as an additional tip, and walked back to her car. The night was the kind of quiet that cities have between 7 and 9 p.m. on a weekday. Not empty, but settled, people moving through it on the way to other things, not looking at each other, which was its own kind of privacy. She drove home. She didn't make any calls. She didn't text her sister back. She sat in her apartment, which was spare in the way that apartments are when someone hasn't fully committed to living in them yet. One plant on the windowsill, a bookshelf with gaps where books have been taken out and not replaced, and she thought. She thought about the camera, about the 14 weeks it had been watching, about whoever was on the other end of that footage, building a map of the building's security rhythms the way she'd been building hers. 2 people, parallel, doing the same work for different reasons. She wondered if they were good. She thought, probably. She thought, so am I. She went to sleep at 10:15. The next morning she was back at 8:55. She signed in. She got her badge. She got her coffee. Real coffee, Priya's method, 2 minutes of waiting for the machine to heat properly. She sat at her desk. She opened her laptop. She didn't look at the maintenance corridor camera feed. She worked on her vulnerability report. She responded to 2 emails. She attended a 30-minute check-in with the facilities team that Brett ran with the energy of a man who had been asked to collaborate with someone he didn't pick and was being professional about it in the specific way that lets everyone know exactly how he feels about being professional. She watched the hallway from her glass-walled office with the particular kind of peripheral vision that doesn't look like watching. On the 2nd day, nothing happened. On the 3rd day, nothing happened. On the 5th day, Priya knocked on her office door at 2:30 and said, "Can I ask you something off the record?" Maya said, "Sure." Priya closed the door. She sat in the extra chair, the one with a wobbly left armrest that Maya had never gotten around to reporting, and said, "I know you found more than you've put in your official reports." Maya looked at her. "I've been here 4 years," Priya said. "I know what the system looks like when it's being watched from outside. I've seen the indicators before. Not here. At my last job." She paused. Government contractor. Different sector. Same pattern. She folded her hands. "I'm not asking you to confirm anything. I'm asking you to tell me if I should be worried." Maya looked at her for a long moment. She said, "Are you the kind of person who worries productively or the kind who worries in circles?" Priya said, without missing a beat, "Productively. Always." Maya nodded slowly. She said, "Don't change your routine. Don't discuss this with anyone. And if you notice something that feels wrong, anything, even small, you come to me first. Not Brett. Not Holloway. Me." Priya nodded. She stood up. At the door she paused and said, "You know what's funny? The first day you came in, when everyone," she stopped. "Brett was in my office that afternoon complaining that the consultant they'd brought in was going to be a problem. I told him she was going to be the most useful person in the building." She opened the door. I was right. She left. Maya looked at her coffee. She thought, "I like her." She went back to work. On day 9, it happened. Not the way she'd expected. Not through a door or a vent or a tailgate badge swipe. Through the things she'd been watching without looking, a name. She'd been going through the keycard log for the executive floor, cross-referencing access times with the building's security roster, looking for any pattern mismatches, and she found one. A name that appeared on the access logs at 11:48 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks before she'd arrived. A name that appeared again the following Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. A name that did not appear on any employee roster she had. A name that appeared when she searched it in the contractor database the building maintained as a temporary electrical systems technician, hired through an outside firm for ongoing maintenance. The hire date was listed as 6 months ago. The authorization signature was Brett's. She sat very still. She pulled up Brett's email logs. She had read access to all department communications as part of her audit scope. And she searched the contractor name. Found one email thread, routine on its surface. Payment approval, schedule confirmation, access badge processing. She read it twice. Then she closed the laptop. She picked up her phone. She typed a message to the number Reyes had used to send the restaurant address. The message was 4 words. She set the phone down. She looked out the glass wall of her office at the 4th floor, at the corridor, at the break room where the coffee machine sat, at the motivational poster, at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon hum of people in a building going about their ordinary Tuesday afternoon lives. She thought about Brett, about his smile at that first meeting, about the way he'd sat in her check-ins with his arms crossed in the particular posture of a man who had something to protect and was protecting it by performing offense. She thought, I should have gotten to this faster. She didn't beat herself up about it. She filed it and moved forward the way you do. 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed. 2 words back, confirmed. Proceed. She opened her laptop. She got back to work. The thing about being underestimated, really genuinely underestimated, not just doubted or questioned, but actively dismissed, is that it has an operational advantage. People who don't take you seriously stop watching you. They stop tracking your movements, your questions, your access patterns. They stop factoring you into the equation, which means you can move through their systems with a freedom that someone they do take seriously wouldn't have. Brett had stopped watching her somewhere around week 2. He still came to the check-ins. He still submitted to the process. But he'd categorized her, filed her somewhere in his mental architecture under handled, and moved on to other things. It was, she thought, a very expensive mistake. She spent the next 4 days doing 3 things simultaneously, continuing her legitimate audit work at exactly the same pace and rhythm so that nothing in her schedule pattern changed, building quietly a secondary file on Brett's access logs, communication records, and contractor approvals that she kept on an encrypted drive that was not connected to any of Meridian's systems. And waiting. Waiting was the part most people couldn't do. It required a particular relationship with time that her training had built into her over years. The ability to understand that urgency is not the same as readiness, and that moving before the moment is right costs more than waiting past comfortable. She waited. On the 13th day, 2 things happened. The first, the contractor's name appeared in the access log again. 11:52 p.m., the previous Tuesday. The second, Priya knocked on her office door at 7:45 a.m., before the official workday, before most of the building was staffed, and said, there's a man in the parking structure. I came in early. He was in the stairwell of the structure. 3rd level. He looked at me, and she stopped. He looked at me like I was a problem to solve. Maya stood up. She said, which stairwell? Priya told her. Maya was already moving. She walked, not ran, walked steadily, purposefully, the walk that doesn't draw eyes, out of her office and down the corridor toward the parking structure entrance. Her access badge got her through the connecting door. The structure was mostly empty at this hour, half full of cars, the kind of quiet that has concrete in it. She went to the 3rd level. She took the east stairwell, not the one Priya had named. She came out at the 3rd level from the far end, which gave her a full sight line of the space. The man was still there. He was standing near a support column, not doing anything observable. No bag, no equipment visible, just standing the way people stand when they are waiting for something that requires them to look like they are not waiting for anything. He was good. She watched him for 30 seconds from 70 feet away. He didn't see her, which told her something. She walked toward him. He heard her footsteps at about 40 feet. The moment his posture changed, almost imperceptibly, the slight reorganization of weight that trained people do before they turn around. She knew the micro-adjustment. She'd done it herself 1,000 times. He turned around. He looked at her. She looked at him. He said, "Building's not open yet." She said, "I'm aware." She held up her badge. "Security consultant. Can I ask what you're doing up here?" He looked at the badge. His face did a quick, practiced inventory of her. The kind of assessment that takes less than 2 seconds and tells you more than a conversation would. She let him do it. She was doing it too. He said, "Electrical inspection. 3rd floor ventilation system." She said, "Can I see your paperwork?" He said, "It's with building management. You have to check with them." She nodded slowly. She said, "Sure. What's your name?" "For my report." He said a name. It wasn't the name from the access logs. It wasn't even close. She nodded again. She said, "Thanks. Have a good morning." She walked back to the stairwell door. She went through it. She called the number. She said in the phone, steadily, "He's here. 3rd level parking structure. East End. He's not alone. The paperwork story means he's buying time for someone else. You have maybe 15 minutes before he's done with whatever he's scoping." She listened. She said, "No. I'll handle the extraction. Send containment to the northeast entrance. Tell them to wait for my signal." She listened again. She said, "I know. I'll be careful." She hung up. She went back through the stairwell door and back onto the 3rd level. The man was gone, which was, she thought, exactly what she'd expected. She'd shown him her badge. She'd asked his name. She'd given him exactly enough of a window to make a decision. And he made it, which told her everything she needed to know about what he was. Not a looker, not a mapper. An actor. Someone there to do something, not just watch it. The clock had changed. She moved. She did not walk this time. She took the stairs 2 at a time. Not because she was panicking. Panic is expensive and she couldn't afford it, but because economy of motion is a different thing than rushing. Economy of motion is a decision about what each second is worth. She'd made the calculation in the stairwell, and the answer was faster. 3rd level to ground. Ground to the main corridor. Main corridor to the connecting door to the building, which she went through at a pace that would have looked to anyone watching like a woman with somewhere to be. Because she was. She had exactly somewhere to be. The server room was on the 2nd floor. She took the internal staircase up. She pushed through the door into the corridor and moved left toward the server room access panel. A keypad and badge reader set into the wall next to a reinforced door that she had cataloged on her first walkthrough as good hardware, terrible logging, accessible via a secondary credential set that IT had issued to the facilities team without an override protocol, which meant that anyone with facilities level access could enter the server room without triggering the primary security alert. Brett had facilities level access. The man from the parking structure had a badge that matched the contractor name in Brett's logs. The door was not open. It was ajar, 1 inch. The kind of ajar that happens when someone goes through a heavy door fast and doesn't hear the click catch. The kind of thing that takes 3 seconds and costs everything. She stopped. She stood very still for 2 full seconds. She listened. Inside the server room, the baseline sound was the ambient hum of server racks, the cycling of cooling fans, the low-frequency white noise that data infrastructure makes when it is alive and doing its work. Under that, nothing. Then, at the edge of nothing, movement. Not dramatic movement. The specific kind that tries to be invisible. The shift of weight on a non-carpeted floor. The micro sound of something being placed carefully on a surface. 1 person. Possibly 2, but probably 1. 2 people in a server room trying to be quiet are louder than 1. She'd learned that empirically, in a building in a country she was never officially in a year she didn't discuss. She pushed the door open with her fingertips. Slow, steady. Hinges that she'd noted were well maintained. No sound. The server room was long and narrow, rows of rack-mounted hardware on both sides. The aisle between them barely shoulder wide. The whole space lit in the particular cold blue-white of indicator lights and overhead fluorescents. At the far end, perhaps 30 feet from the door, a man was crouched to the base of the last rack. A device in his hand that she recognized by its profile, a portable extraction unit, the kind used to pull data off air gap systems through a direct interface, the kind that costs more than most people earn a year and is not available through any channel a legitimate electrician uses. He hadn't heard her come in. She let the door close quietly behind her. She walked toward him. At 20 feet, he heard her. At 15, he stood up, turning, and in the half second between standing and turning, she saw him make the calculation. The same 2-second inventory the parking structure man had done, running the same math. Who is this? What do I do with her? He landed on a conclusion that was wrong. Hey, he said. Pleasant. Surprised sounding. I'm with the facilities crew. Just checking on, I know who you're not, Maya said. He stopped. She was 10 feet away. She had positioned herself in the only part of the aisle where the rack geometry put a support column to her right, cover if she needed it, but also it narrowed the space, which changed his options. She'd done this automatically before she'd had a fully conscious thought about it, the way your lungs breathe before you decide to breathe. He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "You're the consultant." "Yes," she said. He said, "They told me about you." She said, "What did they tell you?" He tilted his head, something that wasn't quite a smile. "That you were good, that we should be careful." He glanced at the extraction device in his hand. "We were careful." "Not careful enough," she said. There was a pause that lasted the length of a decision. He moved first. It was fast. She gave him that. Trained, fluid, the kind of fast that comes from someone who has spent real time building real skills and not just the performance of them. He went right toward the gap in the rack row, trying to change the geometry of the space the way she'd changed it against him, looking for the angle that would let him get to the door. She was already moving. She went left, not after him, laterally, parallel, using the rack row as a shared wall between them, covering the distance to the door faster than he could, because she'd already mapped the fastest route when she walked in. She'd done it without deciding to. It was just in her now, that mapping, the way certain things get written into the body until they're not habits anymore. They're just what the body does. She got to the door a step before him. She turned. He pulled up. He was maybe 5 feet away, and in a narrow aisle with the door behind her, his options had collapsed to one, which was through her, and they both knew what that meant. He was good. He knew what she was. He set the extraction device on the nearest rack surface. He put both hands up, not surrendering exactly. Resetting. The hands of a man who is deciding whether this situation is recoverable. She said, "The device stays here. You come with me." Quietly. He said, "And if I don't?" She looked at him. The flat look. The one she'd been using since her first day in the Horizon room. Not aggressive, not performed. Just the particular stillness of water in a place where the wind doesn't reach. She said, "Then we find out if they told you enough about me." He thought about it for 3 seconds. She watched him think about it. She watched the calculation run. He said, "Fine." She opened the door. She gestured. He went through. She picked up the extraction device on the way out, slid it into the interior pocket of the blazer. The cream one, still her sister's, which she'd been meaning to return for 2 weeks, and followed him into the corridor. She pulled out her phone. She sent 2 words to the number. Northeast entrance. Now, they walked through the building at the pace of 2 people with somewhere to go. She'd thought about this. The walk from the server room to the northeast entrance, which was not the building's main exit, but a side door that led to a loading area, and from there to a service road where the containment team would be waiting. The walk was 3 minutes if you moved normally. Long enough for something to go wrong. Nothing went wrong. Nobody looked at them twice. This was the thing about buildings full of working people. Everyone is absorbed in their own particular version of the morning. The man in front of her could have been any contractor, any vendor, any of the dozen non-staff humans that move through a building this size every day. She was the consultant with a badge. They were 2 people walking. She thought about Brett for the entire 3 minutes. About whether he was in the building. About when he'd find out. About the email thread she'd found. Routine on its surface, payment approval, schedule confirmation, and what would mean for him when the thread was read by people who understood what they were reading. She thought, probably not his first time. Probably not his first arrangement. The ease of it, the cleanness of the contractor's setup, the thoroughness of the cover spoke to practice, to comfort, to someone who had made this kind of exchange before and trusted that the architecture of legitimate paperwork was enough of a shield. It wasn't. She opened the northeast door. The loading area was empty. At the end of the service road, 2 vehicles were parked, sedans, unmarked, the kind that announced themselves by being too clean and too anonymous to be anything civilian. She walked him to the first vehicle. A man she didn't recognize took over, showed credentials, gestured to the back seat, handled it with the particular quiet efficiency of someone doing the unremarkable part of a remarkable thing. She handed over the extraction device. The man she'd walked out of the server room looked at her one more time before he got in the car. He said, "You're not really a consultant, are you?" She said, I am, actually. He thought about that. He got in the car. The vehicle pulled away. She stood in the loading area for a moment. The morning was cool. The sky was the color of old paper. Behind her, through the door she'd come through, the building hummed with its ordinary Tuesday. She thought, that's one. She went back inside. Brett was in his office on the third floor. She knew because she'd checked his keycard log at 8:45 a.m. and he'd badged in at 8:22, which was 8 minutes earlier than his average arrival time over the past 43 days, which was a deviation she'd noticed before she'd left for the parking structure and filed in the back of her head in the category of possibly relevant. It was relevant. She knocked on his office door. He said, "Come in." She came in. He was at his desk, looking at something on his computer that he minimized too fast when she opened the door. The specific speed of someone who closes a window not because what they're doing is wrong, but because the person coming in has made them feel like what they're doing might be seen as wrong, which in Brett's case was the same thing. She said, "The contractor who services your electrical systems. The one you approved the badge access for 6 months ago. I need the original paperwork. Full documentation." He said, pleasantly, with a professionally neutral face she'd learned to read like a text. "Of course. I can pull that together by end of day." She said, "Now please." He looked at her. She looked at him. The thing about Brett, the thing she'd understood since week 2, but had been patient about because patience is the tool you use when you're waiting for the right moment, and the wrong moment is expensive, was that he was smart in the way people are smart when they've never been seriously tested. He was good at managing systems, at building cover, at the paperwork architecture of looking clean. He was not good at the moment when that architecture stops working, because that moment requires a different kind of intelligence, improvisation, adaptation, the ability to recalibrate under pressure. And those skills are built in the fire, and Brett had never been in the fire. She had. He opened his desk drawer. He said, "I'll need a minute to find the file." She said, "Take your time." She stood there. She didn't sit down. She didn't look at anything in the room except him, with the flat, patient attention of someone for whom waiting is not uncomfortable, which is itself a form of pressure, because most people, when they're being watched with that quality of attention, start to feel the weight of what's being observed. Brett felt it. She watched him feel it. He said, after 45 seconds of drawer searching that she was confident was not actually searching, "I'm not sure where I filed this. I might need to check with my assistant." She said, "That's fine." She said, "I'll wait." He looked up at her. She said, "I'm very patient." The thing that happened in Brett's face in that moment, the small, quiet collapse of something, the moment when professional neutral becomes impossible to maintain because the calculation has run and the answer has come back wrong, was not dramatic. It was not a breaking. It was a rearrangement, like a building settling under a weight it had been pretending wasn't there. He closed the drawer. He said, "What do you know?" She said, "Everything I need to." He was quiet. She said, "The people who are going to have the rest of this conversation with you are going to arrive in about 20 minutes. I'd suggest you don't call anyone in the meantime." She paused. "Not for your sake. Just, it won't help you. The calls are already logged." She turned to leave. He said, "You were never just a consultant." She stopped. She looked back at him. She said, "I was exactly a consultant. A very good one. The consulting was real. The security vulnerabilities were real. The report I've been writing for 6 weeks is real and thorough, and Meridian is going to be significantly safer because of it." She paused. The rest of it was just also happening. She opened the door. She said, "The Northeast camera works now, by the way, in case you were wondering." She left. By noon, the building knew something had happened. Not the details. The details were contained, processed, moved through channels that don't surface in office gossip. But the texture of the morning had changed, the way air changes before weather arrives, and people in offices feel these changes without being able to name them. Richard Holloway called her into his office at 12:30. He had the look of a man who has received information through official channels that has rearranged something fundamental about his morning and is working to process it behind a composed face. He said, "I've been informed that there was a security incident today." She said, "Yes." He said, "And that it was resolved." She said, "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I want to understand the scope of your engagement here, whether what you were doing went beyond the standard consulting brief." She looked at him. She said, "My consulting brief was a full security audit of Meridian's physical and digital infrastructure. That's what I've been doing." She set a folder on his desk. Her report printed 62 pages, tabbed by priority level. I found 43 vulnerabilities, 6 critical, 1 that turned out to be active rather than theoretical. I addressed the active one this morning. The rest are detailed in the report, with remediation timelines and cost estimates. He looked at the folder. He looked at her. He said, slowly, with the particular thoughtfulness of a man who is recalibrating something he thought he understood. When you walked into that first meeting. He gestured vaguely at his jacket. Blazer, she said. Yes, I thought. He stopped. She said, I know what you thought. He said, I owe you an apology. She said, you owe the building better security infrastructure. The apology's secondary. She stood up. The report covers everything. Priya can help implement. She's the strongest security mind you have in-house. You should be using her more formally. She walked to the door. He said, Ms. Chun. She turned. He said, that laugh. In the first meeting, I know, she said. She said it the way she said everything. Flat, calm, the surface of water where the wind doesn't reach. She left. She found Priya in the break room at 1:15. Priya was making coffee. The machine, 2 minutes of waiting, the method she'd taught Maya on day 3. She looked up when Maya came in. She said, is it over? Maya poured herself a cup. She said, this part. Priya nodded. She said, the man from the parking structure, gone, Maya said. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, how long have you actually been doing this? Not the consulting, the other thing. Maya drank her coffee. She said, 12 years. Priya said, and they sent you here, to a corporate building, with a visitor badge. Maya said, the consulting was real. Priya looked at her. Something in her face did the thing that Priya's face did when she was running a calculation. A slight narrowing, a slight internal adjustment, the expression of someone putting pieces together faster than most people would. She said, you found a camera. You built the case. You walked him out of the building in a blazer with gold buttons. Maya said, it's my sister's blazer. Priya said, I know. She looked at her coffee. I heard you the first week. In a parking lot, on the phone. You said you'd return it. She looked up. You never did. Maya looked at the blazer. She thought, I really should return it. She thought, with the particular flat precision she applied to most things. I won't. Priya said, so what happens now? Maya said, now the report gets implemented. The vulnerabilities get addressed. The building gets safer. She set down her cup. And I go home. Priya said, for how long? A pause. I don't know, Maya said. Which was true. She'd call Reyes tonight. Reyes would tell her what came next. Whether there was a next thing, whether reintegration was ongoing, whether the consultant cover was done or continuing, whether 12 years of being the person that rooms didn't take seriously until they had to was something she was supposed to keep doing or something she was supposed to eventually be done with. She didn't know. She stood in the break room of a building she'd spent 6 weeks making safer, drinking coffee from a machine she'd learned to use on day 3, wearing a blazer that belonged to someone else, and she didn't know what came next, which was the thing about her life that was most unlike everything she trained for. Because training gives you the sequence, the protocol, the next step already determined, and civilian life, reintegrated life, was the endless open field of no sequence, no protocol. Next step, unknown. She thought about the man in the server room, about the 3 seconds he'd taken to decide, about the way he'd set the extraction device down. She thought about the first meeting, the laugh. She thought about Richard Holloway's face when she'd walked in with the gas station coffee, and the too big blazer, and about what his face had looked like at 12:30 when he'd slid the 62-page report toward himself and understood in the way that understanding sometimes comes suddenly and completely and a little bit late, that the person he hadn't taken seriously had been the most important person in the building the entire time. She thought, I was always going to be that person. She thought, I always have been. Priya said, you know, they're going to talk about this. The people in that first meeting. The laugh. What happened today? Maya said, probably. Priya said, does that bother you? Maya thought about it genuinely. Not in the deflecting way, not in the way that says yes, but means I won't admit it. Actually thought about it, the way she thought about everything she was honest with herself about. She said no. She said they should talk about it. Maybe next time someone walks into a room, they don't expect to belong there. They think twice before they laugh. She put down her cup. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door of the break room, and she stopped because Priya was looking at her with the expression of someone who has more to say and is deciding whether to say it. And Maya had learned to read that expression in a lot of people in a lot of rooms, and she respected it. She waited. Priya said, "Thank you. For all of it. For taking it seriously. The camera. The shaft. The things I'd been trying to get people to look at for 4 months." Maya said they were worth looking at. She paused. "You were right," she said. "You were right the whole time. The problem wasn't that nobody saw the risk. The problem was that nobody looked at the person who was already seeing it." She looked at Priya for a moment. She said, "That's also in the report. The last section. Personnel recommandation." Priya blinked. Maya said, "You should be running security for this building. Formally. With a title and the budget and the authority to make them fix things without having to ask Brett twice." She shrugged. "I said so. In writing. 62 pages." She walked out of the break room. She walked down the corridor. Past the motivational poster. Every day is a new opportunity. The font that deserved jail time. Past the empty glass-walled office that had smelled like cardboard and had been hers for 6 weeks. Past the server room door that was now properly closed and would, by end of week, have a new logging system and a secondary alert protocol. She went down the stairs. She crossed the lobby. The receptionist, the young man with the per-what smile, looked up and said, "Have a good afternoon." She said, "You too." She pushed through the main doors and walked into the afternoon, which was cool and overcast, the sky still the color of old paper. The parking lot half full. The northeast corner of the building now covered by a camera whose small red light blinked steadily in a gray afternoon air. She got her car. She sat for 4 seconds. She thought about her sister's blazer. She thought about the call she'd make tonight to Reyes and what Reyes would say and what would come after that. She thought about the first meeting, about 23 faces turning toward the door, about the laugh. She thought about the man in the server room looking at her and saying, "They told me about you, that you were good, that we should be careful." They were careful, he'd said. She turned the key. Not careful enough, she thought. She pulled out of the lot. She merged into traffic. She drove. She did not look back at the building. She didn't need to. She already knew every inch of it.